All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I am Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me tonight. We got some news about Ukraine, but I'm going to give it a minute for the stream to spool up. So hopefully it's coming through appropriately and not missing anything, and we'll be able to get talking in a pretty short order here. I think I've just got the message that I am live on my channel, so it should be good to go there. And we've got a lot of stuff to get updated with. Just so you know, I do try and make sure that keeping up with what's going on in the Ukraine war. I have been doing videos on the Israel-Hamas war for the last little bit for the other channel that's asked me to work with them. And in the meantime, I've been just kind of putting live updates here. Just had word that they would like me to make sure that if there's major news on the Ukraine war, that I switch over and do a Ukraine war video as well. So there's going to be some of that going on as well. And when that happens, I'll try and post the link in a community post here. In the meantime, let's go ahead and switch over to our my screen here so you can see what I am seeing, because we're going to get started. Should be this one. All right. If you've been paying any attention to what's going on in the news, there was this big kerfuffle in all the lesser news sources, and by lesser I just mean not the mainstream media, that Vladimir Putin was in cardiac arrest and that everybody was going to be all up and all crazy and panicking, and he was rushed to a special medical facility and all this type of stuff. Entirely unfounded speculation, but at least it's entertaining to take a look at. So we'll just go ahead and scroll on down here. It's pretty funny. There's a very detailed description. I mean, you could not write a better story as far as the president getting ill and having a heart attack right in the middle of things. But as we scroll down and look things over, there's really, the truth is, hey, Casman, glad to see you tonight. Glad to have you here. How you doing, by the way? Let me know. So, yeah, none of these serious outlets picked up on it because it was reported by this place that has claimed that Putin has died multiple times now. So there's no valid information there. As one user said, though, I'll only believe it's true when the Kremlin issues a statement that says President Putin is in good health. Well, Peskov says Putin has no body doubles, and rumors about health problems are just another canard. So you've now got Russia officially denying there's anything wrong with Putin, but they're also denying he has body doubles, which is something is pretty widely known anyway. So take that for what you will. I thought that'd be a great opener for today. Now we'll go on to the kind of the news around Ukraine part of this right here. The Ukrainian farmers believe a new Black Sea corridor would allow exports of up to 2.5 million metric tons of food per month. That's almost as much as what they were doing before Russia exited the Black Sea grain deal. So that is awesome news. And if they can get those exports up that high, it'll be at least a start to recovering that type of those revenues for Ukraine. Really interesting to see that things are going that well. By the way, just as a reminder, since I'm doing this as kind of a live, as it's not edited, there's no special preparations done. So an advertisement may pop up or anything like that could happen. And you just don't know. So if one of those things pops up, I do apologize. Also, I want you to know that it's also not exactly orderly and neat. So you're going to see me read some things and then give my thoughts on them. I've scanned them already. I have had kind of put my thoughts together. But still, there's going to be times where what I'm reading, I'm going to be taking on the fly. Hi, Robert. Glad to have you here. I believe I got your email, and I'll be responding to that shortly here. Kyiv University says they have closed courses in Russian, Belarusian, and Farsi. They're getting rid of those those courses because they're focusing on their base languages again. And to be honest, a lot of it is just they're trying to de-Russify themselves. That said, there is some issues when there is legitimate research that they might have to quote that is Russian. So they say they want to stick with historical sources, which are acceptable, and links in any other published language. So if there's a Russian source that's published in English, you can use it, etc., but not the actual in Russian language. They explain that there's no academic freedom in Russia, and educational and scientific advances are connected with state propaganda. So you can't rely on a Russian educational or position paper or research paper just because they're too tied with the propaganda of the state. There is a new drone in town. Isn't this thing cute? It's a little bit bigger than the radio control car. Hi, Lucille. Glad to have you on board. I hope you guys are doing great. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. I am watching. But check out this little drone right here. Isn't it the cutest little thing? All right up until you look at it and you realize that is a TM62 anti-tank mine dead in the center of that drone. And of course, they strapped some hardware to the top of the top one. But this is how this is their new kamikaze robot. It carries anti-tank mines and a combat module. It can run out to 6 kilometers away and has a runtime of about 2 hours, as I recall. I might have another article on this. Oh yeah, here is the testing video right here, which you should be able to see all right. And it's obviously fast forwarded. They move this thing around and they blow a minivan clean into little bits and pieces. So real fun. By the way, if there's any YouTube censors that watch this later, this is testing footage. It is not combat footage. So, there's no problems there. Please do not, come and shut me down. But lots of fun there. 24 kilometers per hour, 6 kilometer range, 2 hours without recharging. And of course, if it's a kamikaze drone, you don't care what happens at the end of that 2 hours because it's going to be in little bitty bits, preferably with an enemy piece of equipment all around it. Budanov, interesting guy. He's, in fact, the other day he was in an interview. They talked about doing a raid in Crimea. And she said, the interviewer said, "How did you get back?" And he said, he smirks and says, "I swam." And he's like, "Isn't that a long way?" "Yeah, it was about 6 kilometers, 8 kilometers maybe." Pretty funny. The guy's got the deadpan look dead down perfectly. The thing is, though, that his colleagues really don't want him going out on all these missions, and yet he just does it anyway. It's hilarious. The guy is deadpan, looks serious all the time, but when you catch his sense of humor, you can just see it light his face, actually his eyes more than anything else. Just a little smirk. But yeah, they try to keep him from going out on missions. He's got so much info in his head that if he actually got caught in a mission, it would be very bad news. But still, interesting guy, and I'll bet you he's a hoot to work for. President Zelensky says, full fire control of Crimea is just a matter of time. That's really, he's looking at the future here. If things continue, even at the slow pace they are right now, as far as movement of territory, they will eventually be in a position where they can get close enough to Crimea to reliably attack any point on the peninsula. They already can pretty much attack anywhere, nearly anywhere, with drones or missiles at their convenience, basically. Overwhelm the localized air defense systems, drop a bunch of hardware in there, blow something important up. According to the National Security and Defense Council leader, the secretary, Oleksiy Danilov, ATACMS way better than they expected it to be. Obviously, they did a tremendous amount of damage in the first ATACMS blow that they pulled off. And they are just like very impressed, even with the shorter range version that they got, compared to the longer range version that's still out there and available. Russia's not going to be happy with ATACMS, that's for sure. This one was interesting. I saw the other day that there were some AIM-9 missiles. I think there were earlier versions like AIM-9Ls or something like that. And they sent those to Ukraine, and it just kind of had no explanation attached. Then I noticed that there was several Su-25s that went down around the Avdiivka area and around southern Ukraine, the Russian Su-25s. Then there was reports of several helicopters being taken down, not just the ones from the ATACMS, but operationally in the field. Then this article comes out. This is supposedly referring to a Financial Times article. Those AIM-9s have been modified and converted to air-to-air, to basically surface-to-air missiles. They built a launcher, they put them on that launcher, and they are driving it out to wherever they need to take out helicopters and airplanes and launching Sidewinders, AIM-9 Sidewinders at AIM-9 missiles at the enemy aircraft. Really creative use of the way they do things. They fixed them up, they got them working, and they're launching them from the ground instead of from the air. Now, it's been possible for a while, I suppose, but you don't typically see it. Most often you see like the Stinger missiles and things like that. Okay, so there's been a series of assassinations lately in Russia. And the Washington Post asked the SBU about it, Ukraine's security service. And they said, "We do not comment on information received by the media from their sources," and added, "comments after victory." Are they involved in some of those high-profile assassinations over there in Russia? Maybe. Maybe not. We don't know, but it sure is interesting. All right, brief pause here for just a moment here. I'm going to grab a drink of water. And in case you missed it, I did mention that the other channel has asked me to do, when there's a major event going on in Ukraine, to switch over and do a Ukraine video again. So I will be doing that, though, when that's not happening. I'm going to try and keep regular updates going on here for the more day-to-day stuff. So keep an eye out for that if things adjust. And whenever I do a Ukraine video, I'll be sure to drop a community post here, so that you can, with a link to that video when they put it up. Might be delayed a bit because I'm not sitting there watching the channel all the time, but I try and pay attention. Let's move on to things going on in Russia. There's been a lot of missiles flying over Rostov-on-Don lately, and they've been very careful about not reporting exactly what's going on. So we don't know if they hit anything important. But this says there's been explosions in Rostov-on-Don. The Institute for the Study of War says that Russia's domestic production of artillery shells supplemented by ammunition from North Korea. By the way, they said the last number I had was 1,000 shipping containers full of ammunition from North Korea. Will likely allow Russian forces to sustain sufficient rates of artillery fire in Ukraine in 2024, albeit at a lower level than during 2022. So they're not going to have quite the shell deficit that they've been experiencing at this point in the war. The question is, can Ukraine successfully find, interdict, and explode that ammunition before it gets to the front lines? So we'll be watching for a sudden increase in exploding supply depots. Now, if you want something as an interesting aside, if you noticed the other day, Russia has redone their federal budget. They are spending more money on defense, and with inflation, it means that they are spending less money on literally everything else. So I think this bit of news here is related to somebody trying to save their budget in the federal budget here. The former head of Roscosmos, Rogozin, wants to use a space rocket to strike Ukraine. He proposed this to Putin. Basically, they take one of their launch vehicles, pack it chock full of explosives, and send it on a ballistic arc into Ukraine, with the idea being to destroy a major Ukrainian city. No word on whether Putin was on board with the idea. It's a bold move. And since those things are intended to launch things into space, that puts it into intercontinental ballistic missile territory. And I suspect that any such attempt will be seen as a significant escalation by the West. And I do mean significant. They're not going to be wanting that combination going off all the time. So we'll have to watch what's going on on the space facilities that Russia has, because they might try and pull this off. That said, there are some issues with that. Number one, the high explosive bombs or warheads they could use would overheat at the speeds they're talking about, with all the friction from the air, and parts of the missile could fall onto Russian territory. And with an impact error of between 50 and 100 kilometers, there's not even telling if they're going to get in the right ballpark of the right city, much less to be able to damage the thing they're looking to damage. It's one of those ideas that somebody thinks up, gets as a wild hair, and then they run with it for some crazy reason. A Moscow military unit was damaged, or persons damaged the fence, and threw 11 bottles of basically Molotov cocktails and a gas cylinder onto the territory of the unit. There was no reports of injuries or significant loss, but I'm not sure they would tell us. What that really tells me, though, is that there's ongoing issues with the mobilization and the popularity of the war. It's not as popular as they like to make it look. More about Rostov-on-Don. Nothing really new about it. Sevastopol also is getting some heat as well. There was a series of loud explosions in the area. Some people say that they might have been repelling an undersea drone attack, and that might have been the cause of the explosions. But that's what the Russian head said of the area said. So I'm not sure I believe that, but we'll keep an eye on that. Or I should say, I'll keep an eye on that, because over here I'm a one-man show. Russia is really continuing to rely on these special Storm Z units, but the Defense Intelligence Update posits that originally those Storm Z units were supposed to be fairly elite units, specially trained and highly effective at the types of assaults that they would be pulling off. Specialized troops. Hi, Douglas. Glad to have you here. And by the way, keep commenting, people. I'm watching for questions and I'm watching the comments. So absolutely comment. I am paying attention. Let me know how you're doing, because I'd like to know. Anyway, they originally think that the Storm Z units were intended to be elite units, highly effective, specifically trained at this type of assault. However, they end up becoming penal battalions. Okay, Kazman, good to know. You're 5 minutes behind. I'd wait 5 minutes, but I don't think that would help you any. Anyway, Storm Z units have turned into penal battalions, where convicts and troops that are on disciplinary charges, low priority for logistics and medical support, and then repeatedly ordered to attack, basically going straight in for the slaughter. And we don't mean of the Ukrainians. The Russians are the ones getting slaughtered. These seem like they're just not doing what they want them to do. One of the private military companies has begun recruiting women into its ranks as full-time, not frontline, but near frontline troops, snipers and drone operators. They're not intended to be like sitting in the trenches, but they're going to be close to the front lines, according to this report. That's an interesting change. And considering how much they've been kind of avoiding that, that could show something about the quality or quantity of recruits that they're able to get for this private military company here. It's so bad, in fact, that if you go into a drunk tank or go into a rehabilitation program, why, they might just say, you should pay us back by signing up for the war. After all, you've successfully been rehabilitated. You now owe us. You should sign up to be a warrior. I'm not so sure they need any more drunks at the front lines, if you know what I'm saying. This piece by Crimean Wind says, it talks about an 87-year-old deal that prevents Russia from really flooding the Black Sea with military hardware. And that is that basically Turkey has the control of the Bosphorus. That's the route out of the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Mediterranean. And of course, the Atlantic Ocean beyond that. They're saying that that Turkey has a special ability, you might say. It's their premium skill, and that is that they can decide when they want to allow ships through the Bosphorus. In fact, they, in particular, they are allowed to restrict any and all warships unless those ships are actually returning to their home bases on the Black Sea somewhere. So that's a lot of the reason why, number one, the Black Sea Fleet doesn't try to come out of there. And it's why they are not able to keep replenishing their fleet. This agreement, Turkey has the control. Guess that means we need Turkey to be on our side for a while longer. Anton Herashchenko says there's 3 factors preventing Russia from replenishing the weapons that Ukraine is currently destroying. Colossal corruption, mistakes by army command at Russia. Of course, Ukrainian army is doing a really good job of blowing stuff up. And these all do not allow Russia to replenish the number of weapons that are being eliminated. So they can't keep up with their losses. Really, I mean, just as a good summary here. And Russia's just not gaining that real emphasis, that real power stroke that allows them to push through Ukrainian defenses. Interesting to read. And speaking of people who are suddenly showing up dead, Vladimir Nekrasov was the chairman of the board of directors for Russian Lukoil, which is, I believe, the largest oil company, and it's government owned effectively, but the largest state-owned oil company in Russia. He died of an acute heart failure. Sounds kind of like he may have drank the tea. But this is the 3rd sudden death among Lukoil's top managers in the past 18 months. The previous one fell out of a hospital window, and the one before that died after a seance with local shamans. I'm not sure I'd want to be in any kind of executive position in a Russian oil company at this point. And that's everything for Russia proper. We're going to be going into the international material here in just a moment. So I'm going to take a pause for a drink of water. And if you have questions, now's a good time. Boop. And I'm back. Turkish president submits Sweden's NATO membership bid to parliament. This is interesting timing. Sweden's been wanting to join NATO. They've been making all the right noises for it. They have already been working in conjunction with NATO. They're already interoperable. And they've said, look, we'd even be willing to send some of our really cool airplanes to Ukraine if we had the guarantees that a NATO membership would bring us. Now Turkey is saying, here's the information. Let's go ahead and get NATO into the party. They had been one of the countries that were kind of holding back on it. So if this is the case, and there's no other direct objections, we could see Sweden joining any time now. Ukrainian minesweepers Chernihiv and Cherkasy took part in the British exercises Joint Warrior 23-2. And they joined the ships of Britain, the Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, Germany, and Denmark to work out mine countermeasure tactics. So nice exercise interoperating with their the NATO partners there. Nice to see them doing it. I mean, it's not like they're going to get over into the Black Sea and do anything right now anyway. So the extra training is good for the Ukrainian Navy. Let's see. I want you guys to hear this one. So hang on with me while I try and get this back all together here. Pause this. Run this back. This is British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and he was finishing a presentation to their Parliament. Which is it? House of Commons over there, I think, off the top of my head, perhaps. And he's finishing that up, and this is, in fact, I better put these on so I can hear what he says again and talk about it. Okay, you should be able to hear it, and if you can't, let me know.
Modern, thriving democracy and the desire to pull it back into some imperialist fantasy of the past. Putin will fail, and so will Hamas. We must keep alive that vision of a better future against those who seek to destroy it. Together with our partners, that is what we will do, and I commend this statement to the House.
So Prime Minister Sunak is really tying the Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war together. Hold on a second. I'm going to put you guys on mute here for a sec. Sorry about that. I'm just handing that off to my daughters to deal with on that. That was just a brief interruption there. Anyway, so Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, is tying the Ukraine war and the Israel war together at the hip, basically stating that they both come from a common source, Russia and Iran, with the two working together so closely. They're effectively the same conflict. At least that's what he's proposing. I still treat them mostly as separate. However, I absolutely see the perspective, and the same bad actors are the ones behind both of them. So that tells me there's more to it than just the just individual wars. In this case, one emboldened the other, perhaps, but they're working together at this point. And if we don't stop them, it's going to be a bad, bad future. Let's go and pop this up a little bit here. I think I can get this a little larger. Perfect. Now this is about a session to the EU, and they're going to have a report on November 8th that discusses the progress Ukraine has made. As far as being prepared for EU membership, they have been making significant changes overall, and they're changing their laws to be compatible with EU membership. And as they do so, they'll find that it's easier to integrate with the European Union. It isn't necessarily a package deal with a NATO membership because obviously they're separate, but as they get closer to the EU, the more allies they develop in the EU, the easier it will be for them to overcome the challenges they're facing, Ukraine's challenges. They'll have more capable partners, more capable abilities to counter the economic hardships by utilizing the resources of the EU as a whole. All right, backing up. Lucille says, glad to hear of the cooperation between compatible partners to preserve liberty in the world. They need to keep those bad actors at bay. Absolutely. That is a vital part of, at least from the U.S. interest, it's a vital part of having a world that is capable of being free in at least some way. It's not easy for nations to be free often. And if we as a nation do not do our part to keep at least the parts of the world free that we can, then we will have failed as a nation. Casman, question, why don't you have Twitter in dark mode? And the answer to that is because I just don't find it to be very useful. I find it doesn't edit neatly into videos in dark mode, and I also find that the stuff that's on it doesn't look right. Often people have white in their stuff or things like that, and it just doesn't blend properly. I just don't like it. Now, on my cell phone, if I'm using that, I'll have it in dark mode because that's a different situation. But on my desktop computer, I find generally that the regular mode is what works for me. Moving on, more international stuff. Slovakia, let's see, right there, perfect. Slovakia will strengthen the border with Ukraine with German Mantis air defense systems, the country's Ministry of Defense stated. Germany had already announced they were donating 2 of them to Slovakia to strengthen their air defense. And on that border is where they're going to be the most needed at this point in time. They obviously can't deploy them into Ukraine proper. But right there is where it's most likely to be the biggest issue that they can at least help with. Rheinmetall and Ukraine's state-owned Ukrainian defense industry, JSC, have set up a joint venture company in Kyiv, with Rheinmetall holding 51% and the Ukrainians holding 49%. That means they're going to be producing even more of their equipment right there in Ukraine. The more they do that, the less they have to rely on international partners, which may at different times be not as reliable as they might need. So this is a great advance for Ukraine, being able to produce more of their own stuff right there on their territory as best they can. Poland is the opposition parties. Hold on, let me see. Let me get this together here. The 3 largest opposition parties in Poland defeated the Law and Justice Party in parliamentary elections and are ready to form a government. So I don't know what that means from the overall political perspective there. I'm going to have to dive into Poland's politics a little bit to see what that means. But last I checked, pretty much most of the parties in Ukraine, including the opposition parties, were all on board with supporting Ukraine. See, this is more about Ukraine's potential membership bid, and the EU is to present a favorable assessment according to their analysis. All good. And if you've been paying attention, you've seen stuff about this undersea telecom cable between Sweden and Estonia that was damaged by tampering. And right now, the new Polar Bear ship, that's a Chinese ship, is the potential suspect in the situation. That ship pulled into a port with no anchor. Let me see, do I have it? Nope, I don't have it here. Okay. That ship pulled into port with no anchor. When they went and looked at this undersea telecom cable, they found an anchor right up against next to it and the hole ripped in the cable. So they are pretty comfortable. They know exactly what happened to that cable. Not sure why they'd be floating around that area with their anchor down, but unless they were doing it on purpose. There we go. Perfect. Good. All right. If you've been following old Viktor Orban lately, you'll note that he's been getting awfully buddy-buddy with Russia lately. And there's been some people, well, there's a bunch of protests over there. In 1956, several thousand Hungarian civilians were killed when Soviet troops entered, suppressing a democratic opposition. They kicked that off eventually. They got rid of the Russians, threw them out. And now that country is headed back into that exact same circumstance. You know, people who tend to be that type of authoritarian, totalitarian, or dictator, it doesn't matter. Throwing off Russia was just a matter of getting him in charge eventually. And notice how they've been going back to this more totalitarian style with Viktor Orban. All right, we're moving on to the front lines. Let me just kind of close some things off here so that's a little bit cleaner on my screen here. Not that it makes any difference over there because what you're seeing is not that. But let's go ahead and go through the front lines. And I'll start with War Gonzo today. Frontline report for October 24th. Kherson direction. He's talking about this, and he says that the Russians basically pushed them back a little, pushed the Ukrainians back a bit. However, the Ukrainians are back with a vengeance, pushing to break back through to Poima and Peshanovka again. There's been a lot of encounters there and a lot of back and forth, but there's still battles going on in Krinky. That's the village that's just up the river from there. So it looks like Ukrainians have managed to stabilize a series of bridgeheads, and they're making it difficult for the Russians in that area. It makes a huge difference on their ability to refocus their attention. And as they keep that front busy, whether they do a breakthrough or not, they will tie up more and more Russian reinforcements having to deal with that front. Conversely, they also tie up some of their own troops and equipment. But when they're on the offense, they have a greater ability to focus their troops and make it so that they are most effective in a localized position. Zaporizhia, no significant changes lately, but shelling back and forth. Let's see, quickly scan. Avdiivka, Stepnoy, we'll get into Avdiivka in a bit. Bakhmut, the armed forces have managed to get over the railway line in the Avdiivka area. Avdiivka is not Avdiivka, so just keep on going back and forth between those two. And Luhansk, they're setting up some more battles in the Serebyanki forest. They've been going back and forth in that area, and Ukraine has recently been clawing some of that territory back, getting it to where they're taking it back from the Russians, who have not successfully been able to get enough people in there to truly hold the territory. No additional information like for Kupiansk area, where the Russians have been having their butts kicked right back to their initial starting lines. And this is this morning. Just a quick review here. Russian counterattack near Robotina, but no change in positions there. Volodar, they're saying that there's some long-range weapons fire in that area. Donetsk, we're talking Novomykolaievka, Marinka, Novolsky, and they say that they have gotten a little bit of progress in that area, which is farther south. A little bit about the waste heap area. They managed to advance in that area and to the north. We'll be talking about that in just a little bit here. The Russians tried to recapture some positions near Avdiivka and Bogdanovka, but no progress for them. And let's see what else we got. I got to make this a little bit smaller so I can see what's going on, guys. Any of this that I need to quickly review here? So a lot of this I already addressed in the last video. All well and good. Now, Ukrainian units have resumed an offensive in the, this is south of Bakhmut, in the Klishchiivka area and Avdiivka area. You can see right there, let me see if I can pull this up here. Let's see, do I have it on right now? I do, good. Excellent. Get that here. Can you see that if I do this? No, dang it. Okay, so can't do any drawing on the map today. Sorry, you'll just have to do with just seeing what little you can of the mouse pointer, which I'll jiggle around a little bit to see if you can see it some. Yeah, it's somewhat visible. Not as visible as I would like. Ukrainian units resumed offensive operations towards that area and pushed the Russians back. That's that dark blue section right there in the middle, little bitty one right in the middle. And the Avdiivka, they're setting a stage for a deeper push. So a lot of things going on right here and a lot of positive things for Ukraine. This was from this morning. Avdiivka fighting continues, and both sides are sending reinforcements to the area. And the Ukrainian force, they mentioned the part about Avdiivka back there, and landings on the Kherson East Bank continue. War Mapper mentions that some positions have been retaken between Bakhmut and Kromove. Let me see if I can find that on the map here. Bakhmut and Kromove. Get over here to Bakhmut. There it is. Okay. So if we look at, I think they actually have an update in this section on the map. These are yesterday's lines. Let me get that centered a little bit there. And these are today's lines, Kromove. That means that they have managed to push their way up the uphill slope here, and they're getting a little bit closer. This whole area around the north end and right around Bakhmut is really being a little bit more difficult for the Ukrainians at the moment. They've been kind of slowly, gently being pushed back a little bit at a time. Eventually, they'll probably have to throw some reinforcements in the area. But remember, this is right next to the Klishchiivka and Avdiivka area. So the more they pressure down here, the harder it will be for the Russians up here. Oops. Well, that's what I want to do anyway, but that'll work. Okay. About the area around Krinky, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, but it's the only pronunciation I got right now. There is a lot of activity. In fact, let me just pop over here. Krinky is right over here. See if I can find it real fast. There it is. A lot of drones, a lot of artillery work right here. There's been continued reports of Ukrainian presence in the village itself. And if you look carefully, you might be able to see that all these little lines here are little roads. Krinky is not tiny. It's not the itty-bitty stuff that we've been kind of used to seeing going back and forth. So if there's a presence, if the Ukrainians are maintaining a presence in Krinky, it may be more serious for Russia than they expect. Overall, everything else is just continuing. More pushing near to Poema and Pishkanivka right here, which is right near the Antonovsky Bridge. You can see the gray area has expanded again. A lot of busy things going on there. Now let's get to Avdiivka. Right there. And the Kyiv Independent put up an article stating Russians are losing a tremendous amount of men and armor. And I think they're hoping to just pull this off before things get too muddy, and so they can have an opportunity to say, hey, look, we successfully took territory even under the bad situation that the Ukrainians have reported that we're in. So we're obviously better off than they say we are. So lots of equipment is being lost in this area. It was pure chaos. The amount of troops they were sending into the assault was pretty ridiculous. It doesn't seem like the Russians even knew what they were doing. It doesn't seem like it was planned out very well. At least the ground troops didn't have a clue. A lot of things going on. They've been throwing slightly better quality troops in there as well lately. But that's after losing their best quality troops in the area. So slightly better does not make them good. Right here. Overall, though, that means there's been a reduction in the amount of ground attacks near Avdiivka. And that means that they're actually assaulting with more aircraft and bombs now. 40 bombs were dropped in the area just I believe in the last 24 hours. They're trying to basically bomb the Ukrainians out of there. So it'll be interesting to see if we have more reports of Russian losses of aviation in this area. Let's kind of take a little bit of a look at the map here. You can see some of the changes over the last day. This is yesterday. Here's today. The big change is right here at the north end, which would be this kind of the shaded area right here. That is the waist tip that they're talking about being the big thing that they're assaulting. And even though the Russians are reporting having taken it, they even put a flag there. But let's see if I can find it now. Man, there it is. Okay, so here is the video. Let's see, I don't want any sound on this one. Copyrighted music and all that kind of stuff. If you watch this video from start to finish, you'll see the flag. What you don't see is anybody near the flag. So some of the Russian troops ran out there, posted the flag, and then ran away. So what do the Ukrainians do? They blow it up. So once again, the Russians are proving that even if you can put a flag there, that doesn't mean you can hold the territory. And so they took it down. So that's the situation in Avdiivka right now. There's been additional pushes on the south end and a few more to Pervomaisk, which I'm sure I'm blowing that pronunciation right now. But overall, the advances that Russians are doing are not huge. They are not even significant in the sense that they have not taken an area that gives them a true tactical advantage at this point. That said, they could keep pushing. If they keep throwing bodies into the meat grinder and they have more bodies than the Ukrainians can successfully destroy, well, they can keep going for a long time. And they could potentially take this territory. So we're going to have to watch this, hope and pray for a while yet to come. More reports of significant losses over there. There's the video there. Now, I don't know what to make of this one yet, but from Dmitry at War Translated, they recovered a Wagner flag, and they're surmising that they destroyed a small Wagner unit in the area of Avdiivka. Now, Wagner's been pretty much split up and are now subservient to Russian military orders at this point. So they could have had a small number of Wagner troops that they deployed there as a higher quality set of troops compared to what they were throwing into the meat grinder. That said, they could just be somebody who bought a Wagner flag over at a shop in Rostov-on-Don, and they brought it with them into battle. Could be either way. Dmitry also says that Avdiivka is turning into another Bakhmut. You can kind of see what things look like there. They're basically flattening everything and destroying it all. And the principle of if I can't have it, you can't have it either. It's a terrible way to wage a war. Oops, don't even know why that's there. More talking about that Terracon waist tip there. Null Reports says that it's heavily contested. It's in a gray zone there. But all the Russians did is plant a flag and run away. So they're on the same, Null Reports is on the same page I am on this one. Whoops, just closed a tab. Yep, an additional, basically all confirming the exact same information. Larger gray zone. They have made some advances, but not to the point where they're actually gaining a tactical advantage out of it. And my voice is starting to go, so I'm going to keep going. But if my voice gives out, just be warned it could happen. A little bit of moving on to the kind of the extras now. We're out of the combat front and everything else going on there. From Gray Zone, this is a makeshift change to a BTRD. It's got a pair of 82 millimeter mortars mounted to it. crazy stuff. I kind of expect the kind of mishmash technicals out of the Ukrainians because they're making do often and with whatever they've got. But when the second largest military in the world is doing it, tells you something. This is an elevator shaft in Mariupol. It's the only remaining piece of the building that the Russians shelled that is left standing. Just a whole big series of elevator doors. Hey, at least they built it nice and solid. By the way, we're coming up on the end, so if you have questions, now's a good time to get them in. I am watching. How's that for a grad rocket going through a tree? I mean, it split it right. You can see the split right there. And the rocket is just sitting there. It looks like they've already pulled the fuse out of it, so it's inert. But man, what an unlucky day for that tree. Interesting bit of information here. This is Viktor Smogin. He was the shift supervisor at the Chernobyl nuclear plant, which exploded on April 26th. He's gone through multiple operations and lived with radiation sickness since. This man, who, considering everything that happened and likely his role in trying to save lives after things went horribly wrong, he took his own life earlier today. Now understand that Chernobyl is part of Ukraine. So even no matter how you look at it, this man paid it all for that situation. See what else I got here. That. Let me move this ahead here. Move this ahead. Move that ahead. Yep, you've just gotten a preview of what I'm going to touch on next. How about a grad launcher on a Humvee? They have a lot of fun doing these technicals over there. They put 9 of those grad launcher tubes on it, and they made a Humvee into just a bombardment tool. Just really creative work by those guys, let me tell you. Here's a Su-27 engaging a Russian airborne target with a R-73 air-to-air missile at low altitude. I mean, literally super close. You can pretty much almost reach out and touch that airplane. It's that low. An NSA employee was caught red-handed trying to send classified information to Russia for money. Looks like they're really working over this guy now. What kind of circumstances are we in? Hang on, I got to pause this. Boop. What kind of circumstances are we in when people are that desperate to send intelligence information to Russia? I mean, they're paying you in rubles, for heaven's sakes. That's a joke. Now, I looked at this person with a bucket on their head, and I said to myself, what in the world is going on? But then they shook the tree, and I realized why the bucket was there. That's one way to harvest some apples. And finally, if you're like me and you're looking for the perfect hairdo, this dog's got the exact circumstances for you. Oh, my heavens. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Any last call for questions? I am still watching. Robert, thank you for being here. Casman, thank you. Lucille, thank you. Douglas, thank you. Everybody, I do appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed today's video, absolutely hit it with a thumbs up so that other people can see it and keep updated on Ukraine. It's important. People do not see how important this war is in the overall fight against evil in the world. Russia has shown itself to be an agent of evil, and I just don't see any way around it. It has to be stopped. And I don't usually put things into such biblical black and white, but perhaps there's still shades of gray there. But right now I'm looking at it, and I see that if we don't stop it, it will run over our world. And that's my thoughts for today. Thank you again. You guys have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next one. And hey, you know what? If you want to share it with a bunch of people too, I wouldn't say no as well.